Okay, let's talk about the structure of the judicial branch, the structure of the different courts. First things first, we do have a parallel system of justice. I think I've mentioned this in a couple of other videos. What that means is the state and federal governments both have court systems. The states have courts for state laws. The federal government has courts for federal laws. We talked earlier about this idea of the supremacy clause. If there's a conflict between state and federal law, that the federal law would be supreme. So federal law would kind of win out. Now, that does not mean the court exists in kind of an inferior to superior kind of relationship. That's not really true. They kind of they're a parallel system of justice, like I mentioned. So they can coexist with one another. Now, depending on the circumstances in your case, that would dictate who has jurisdiction, like who has the right to hear your case. Depending on the people involved, depending on the actual law it breaks. And sometimes, many times, they have what's called dual jurisdiction, where the federal courts and the state courts could theoretically have a claim to your case. In those situations, we have to have some communication between the officials of each court. Now, they might talk about who has the stronger case. I think I used the example of Michael Vick violating both state and federal law with his dogfighting ring. In that scenario, it's who wants it first might be, again, who has the strongest case, and then the other court might back down and say, if you're going to try it, we don't need to hit him twice. That we think that's an appropriate punishment, what you're going to get him for. Like in Michael Vick, Georgia backed off when the federal government got a conviction. Now, if the federal government dropped the ball, Georgia might say, we don't think getting away with it scot-free is right either. So now we're going to go after them. So they could kind of wait and hold off on their decision until they find out the result of the first one, the first trial. Okay, so jurisdiction. Who's involved? Now, it has federal jurisdiction if it violates the Constitution, if it violates federal law, if it has to do with people from multiple states, if it has to do with a conflict between a government official and somebody from a state, if it has to do with a conflict between foreign ambassadors and somebody from a state, all of those would be federal jurisdiction. If you violate a state law or a state constitutional matter, your jurisdiction would be in the state. A lot of what we think of is of going to court for assault or drunk driving or vandalism or stealing. That's probably going to be violating state law, so you're going to go to state court, the state court system. Now, how this is actually set up, let's talk about the federal system. It's set up, your first appearance would generally be in what's called district court. There are 94 district courts across the country. These are the workhorses of the federal system. Everything starts here. Well, most everything starts here. They have what's called original jurisdiction. That's the starting point. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in another video. So district courts are the workhorses. That's where we kick things off. If you do not like the result of your case in the district court, let's just say you're found guilty, and you're like, I'm not guilty, that's wrong. You can appeal it to an appeals court. We have 13 different what's called circuits in the United States. 12 of them have to do with a certain region of the country, and the 13th circuit is like a special circuit in Washington, D.C. So the appeals courts are where you go to appeal your particular decision. In our situation, our appeals court is in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're in circuit number 6. So you're going to go to Cincinnati, and that's where you'd appeal your decision. It's a little different makeup. Like a district court is when you go to district court, what you think of a court is going to play out with the judge and witnesses. An appeals court is a panel of judges, kind of like the Supreme Court, where you're going to make your appeal, and then they're going to decide what to do with it. Now, appeals court, you can do 3 different things in an appeals court. 3 decisions can be made. They can say the district court got it absolutely correct, and they said you are guilty, and you indeed are guilty. Like, we found that to be the case as well. they could reverse your decision. They could say, wow, they found you guilty. Like, they are way wrong. Like, you are not. You are completely not guilty of this. The third thing they could do is they could send it back to the lower court, in this case, the district court, and say, we'd like you to try this again. We're concerned. We don't know that it's concerning enough to reverse it, but we'd like you to try it again. We think see if you come out the same way. They could do that. Now, once the appeals court has their say, if you've lost again and you're like, there's no way, I'm taking it all the way. I'm taking it to the Supreme Court. I'm doing it. You could appeal to the Supreme Court. This is the court in the United States, the court of last resort. Once you get to the Supreme Court, you cannot go any further. I will tell you that it's really difficult to get to the Supreme Court. Less than 1% of all cases that appeal to the Supreme Court get picked. The Supreme Court hears about 100 cases a year. So anybody that's shooting their mouth off and says, like, I'm taking this to the Supreme Court, they probably won't. Numbers say they are probably not going to. Because the Supreme Court picks about 100 cases, and that's it for the year. That's all they can hear. That's all. There's only 9 people on the Supreme Court, so they just don't have the time or the ability to hear more than that. Once the Supreme Court makes a decision, the decision is final. So that's why I call it the court of last resort. You can't go. There's not another step after that. If you've lost there, you've run out of chances. You can appeal to again to the Supreme Court, say, like, I'd like you to hear it again, but probably not going to be very successful. So that's how the court system is set up. If you have any questions, please. Oh, one more thing. I mentioned this last unit, and I think it bears repeating. Now, this is for the federal courts. There are some special courts that are set up by Congress. Things like the Court of Veterans' Appeals, or the Court of, like, there's a military court that's set up, or bankruptcy courts that are set up. So there's all kinds of specialty courts that are set up by Congress. Congress, like I mentioned, has the ability to change the jurisdiction of all these courts if they like. They have the ability to set up new courts, and they have the ability to change the amount of judges or Supreme Court justices that are on every one of these courts. So they have a little bit of power. They have a little bit of say over what the court does. Okay, wanted to get that in there. I almost forgot. That would have been big. Okay, if you have any questions, please absolutely contact me, and I will get you some answers. If you just want to say hi, you can do that too. That's okay. Other than that, I will see you guys around. I'm sure there'll be other videos. So I'm going to change my hat and sweatshirt, and I'm going to make another one of these. So see you later. Enjoy.